Superior pond, superior care. Your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest at your call. Your pond stays perfect all year long.
Welcome to the deep dive. So picture this. It's early May, and a homeowner in Lakeville, Minnesota decides this is the year they finally tackle their backyard ecosystem pond.
Right, getting it ready for summer.
Exactly. It had been neglected for a couple of seasons, getting overgrown, a bit murky. So they hire professionals, spend a couple of $1,000s on this massive spring cleaning, and for a brief moment, it is absolutely pristine. Like, the rocks are sparkling, the water is crystal clear. But just a few weeks later, the homeowner is back on the phone totally panicking because the water is already turning green.
And, that panic usually doesn't stop with just the watercolor.
Oh, not at all. Because then July hits, bringing this really hot, dry stretch of weather. The homeowner calls back, convinced there's a catastrophic leak because the water level is dropping rapidly.
Oh, yeah, the missing water panic.
Yeah, right. Then, maybe a few days later, there's another distressed call because a koi fish is just, sitting motionless near the bottom of the pond. To the homeowner, their expensive backyard oasis feels like it's completely falling apart in real time.
Which is, frankly, an incredibly stressful way to experience something that is fundamentally designed to bring you peace.
Totally.
But those reactions, the panic over the green water, the dropping levels, the sluggish fish, they're all symptoms of a single massive misconception about what a water feature actually is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that misconception is really the core of what we are digging into today. We're exploring this really fascinating guide called Water Feature 101, put together by Superior Ponds, a team of experts based out of Minnesota.
That's a great resource.
It really is. And our goal with this deep dive is to sort of shortcut your journey to becoming a backyard pond expert. We want to take that stress, that constant fear that you're doing something wrong, and replace it with an understanding of how these systems actually function.
Because the root of the problem, really, is that people expect a backyard pond to act like a swimming pool.
Yes, the swimming pool expectation.
A swimming pool is the perfect contrast here because it is a chemically enforced, completely static environment.
Right.
It is essentially a sterile concrete bowl filled with chlorinated water designed to remain completely unchanging day in and day out. But an ecosystem pond is fundamentally different.
It's alive.
Exactly. It's a living, breathing biological system. It fluctuates with the weather, it reacts to the seasons, and it constantly seeks an internal balance. So when you expect a living ecosystem to behave like a sterile swimming pool, you are setting yourself up for constant anxiety.
I think anyone who has paid for a custom water feature probably wrestles with this, though. I mean, if you are shelling out thousands of dollars for a backyard focal point, there's this natural instinct to want it looking like a pristine 5-star resort pool.
Of course.
The idea of embracing the biology of it almost sounds like an excuse for having a swamp in the yard. Like, wait, if I pay thousands for this, I don't want a swamp.
The irony there, though, is that chasing that sterile resort pool perfection is usually what creates the swamp.
Wait, really?
Yeah. A spotless, chemically sterile pond is actually a fundamentally broken pond.
Huh?
A properly functioning water feature relies on a very specific biological engine to stay clear and healthy. You need beneficial bacteria, moving water, aquatic plants, fish, and sunlight, all interacting in a specific sequence.
Okay, so it reminds me of baking bread with a sourdough starter.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, like if you try to aggressively sanitize a sourdough starter because it looks bubbly or smells a little weird,
Yeah.
you are chemically nuking the exact microorganisms that make the bread rise in the first place. You completely ruin the system by trying to clean it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is a perfect analogy. The pond has its own version of that starter,
Yeah.
and it's something homeowners frequently try to destroy.
Oh.
Yeah, if you look closely at the rocks and gravel inside a healthy pond, you'll notice this dark, slightly fuzzy coating. A lot of people see that and immediately assume it's dirt or sludge, so they grab a pressure washer to blast it off.
Which I would totally do, honestly.
Most people do. But that coating is called biofilm. It is essentially the pond's liver.
Whoa. So by scrubbing the rocks, you're physically removing the system's ability to filter itself.
Yes, you're stripping away millions of colonies of beneficial bacteria that naturally process the nutrients and waste in the water.
Wow.
When you pressure wash the rocks or dump harsh chemicals to achieve that sterile look, you destroy the biological filter. And without that filter, the waste has nowhere to go.
Which leads to the green water.
Exactly. Massive algae blooms, cloudy water, and this vicious cycle where you become entirely dependent on dumping more and more chemicals into the water just to keep it somewhat clear. The experts are very clear on this point. Overcleaning a pond is actually one of the worst things you can do to it.
It takes a major mental shift to view those rocks as a biological filter rather than just like decorative landscaping.
It really does.
And since this water is constantly interacting with biology, it makes sense that it's also constantly interacting with the atmosphere above it. Which brings us to the environmental factor that causes perhaps the most homeowner anxiety: missing water.
Oh yeah. Evaporation is incredibly deceptive, especially for new pond owners.
The statistics the Superior Ponds Guide provides on evaporation in Minnesota summers are staggering. They note that normal evaporation can account for 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch of water loss every single day.
Just from normal weather.
Right. But if you have a pond with dramatic waterfalls, long winding streams, or, shallow pooling areas, you can lose up to 3/4 of an inch daily.
Which is huge.
A 3/4 inch drop across a large surface area is gallons and gallons of water just vanishing into thin air. It is so easy to see why someone would assume they have a physical hole in the liner. I mean, how does anyone tell the difference between a hot, windy day and a catastrophic leak?
It's tough because it's a significant volume of water. And that evaporation rate isn't static. It spikes dramatically based on the weather conditions. High temperatures are obvious, but low humidity and high wind are the real drivers.
Okay.
If you have a waterfall, you are constantly churning water and creating microscopic droplets. You're basically running a misting machine in your backyard.
That makes sense.
So on a dry, windy day, the wind catches that mist and carries it completely outside the perimeter of the pond. The water isn't leaking, it's just being relocated by the breeze.
But distinguishing between a hot, windy Tuesday and an actual catastrophic leak in the rubber liner seems almost impossible without, digging up the entire yard.
That's why people panic.
The guide shares an anecdote about a homeowner in Prairie Lake that really highlights how microscopic these issues can be. The homeowner was absolutely convinced their heavy-duty rubber liner had suffered a massive tear because they were losing water so quickly.
Right, so the professionals came out to inspect the entire system, anticipating a major repair. And instead of a torn liner, they found a single baseball-sized decorative rock sitting in the waterfall unit.
The biofalls box, right?
Exactly, the biofalls box, which is just the upper unit that houses filter pads and creates the waterfall drop.
And that single rock was the culprit?
Completely. Over the winter, the ground had settled just a fraction of an inch, causing this one rock to shift slightly toward the edge.
Oh, wow.
That tiny shift altered the flow of the water just enough that during windy afternoons, the surface tension of the water was clinging to the rock and channeling a steady trickle right over the edge of the rubber liner and into the surrounding dirt.
That is wild.
The professionals simply picked the rock up, moved it 2 inches to the left, and the massive catastrophic leak was instantly cured.
That highlights a really frustrating reality, though. If you don't have an expert standing there to spot the rogue rock, you could spend weeks pulling your hair out.
Oh, easily.
But the guide details a very systematic diagnostic process called the water drop test, which I found fascinating. It's almost like pausing a video game to isolate a glitch,
Yeah.
Using the water level itself to do the detective work.
It's a brilliant method.
So you basically fill the pond up to its maximum level, turn off all the equipment pumps, waterfalls, aerators, and just let the water sit completely still for anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. And you take photos of the skimmer faceplate each day to track exactly where the water stops dropping.
It is an elegant way to isolate the variables because an operating water feature has too many moving parts to diagnose a leak visually. By turning the pump off, you immediately split the system in two.
Okay, let me see if I have the logic of this right. If I turn the pump off, the water up in the waterfall stream obviously drains down into the main pond basin, and then everything sits still.
Right.
If the water level in the main basin continues to drop over the next 2 days while the system is off, that tells me the hole has to be somewhere in the main pond area itself.
Okay, that's correct. The water will continue to drop until it reaches the exact level of the leak, and then it will stop.
Got it. But if I turn the pump off and the water level in the pond stays perfectly steady for 2 days, that means the main basin is completely watertight.
Exactly.
The leak only happens when the pump is turned on and actively pushing water up to the top of the hill. So my leak has to be somewhere in the plumbing or in the waterfall stream or from splash out.
You've just eliminated 70% of the pond from your search area without digging a single hole.
That's so smart.
The vast majority of leaks are not dramatic tears in the thick rubber liner. They have simple water routing problems, like we saw with the prior lake anecdote. It might be soil settling along the edge of a stream, causing the liner to dip below the water line, or, plants growing too aggressively and wicking water out over the edge.
Which happens a lot.
Taking the time to run the water drop test yourself before calling a professional can save a tremendous amount of money on diagnostic visits.
For sure. So we have the physical loss of water covered. But we need to shift from missing water to the other major panic trigger, the color of the water.
Ah, yes, the green monster.
We touched on this earlier, but when a pond turns into a thick, green pea soup consistency, it feels like a total failure. The guide specifically mentions new pond syndrome.
This brings us back to the biology and why patience is usually the most important tool you own.
Right, because when someone builds a brand new pond, they fill it with fresh hose water, maybe add some fish, and expect it to stay clear. But within a week or two, it almost universally turns bright green.
It goes back to that sourdough starter concept and the biofilm. In a brand new pond, those colonies of beneficial bacteria haven't had time to establish themselves on the rocks yet.
It's too new.
Right, the ecosystem essentially has a biological vacuum. The bacteria grow relatively slowly. Algae, on the other hand, is incredibly opportunistic and grows incredibly fast.
The guide spends a lot of time on something called the nitrogen cycle, which seems to be the engine driving this entire green water phenomenon.
The nitrogen cycle is the invisible machinery keeping the pond alive.
Yeah.
When you add fish to a pond, they eat and they produce waste. That waste, along with decaying leaves or leftover fish food, breaks down and introduces toxic ammonia into the water.
Okay.
If a moody builds up, it will kill the fish. But in a healthy system, our beneficial bacteria consume that toxic ammonia and convert it into nitrites. Then a different type of bacteria consumes the nitrites and converts them into nitrates.
And nitrates are basically just a natural fertilizer, right?
Yes, nitrates are relatively harmless to the fish, but they act as a potent plant fertilizer. The aquatic plants in your pond consume the nitrates to grow, which removes them from the water, completing the cycle.
Okay, I see.
But in a new pond, you don't have enough bacteria to process the ammonia, and you might not have enough plants to consume the resulting nitrates. The water is suddenly packed with unused fertilizer, and the algae simply rushes in to feast on it.
That makes sense.
The water turns green because the algae is stepping up to consume the excess nutrients that the rest of the system isn't mature enough to handle yet.
So what does this all mean for older ponds, though? That makes perfect sense for a new pond. But the Superior Ponds Guide also addresses older, established ponds that have been crystal clear for 5 years and then suddenly turn green overnight.
An established pond turning green always indicates a sudden environmental imbalance. The nitrogen cycle has been disrupted. Often, homeowners start overfeeding their fish, dumping more nutrients into the water than the bacteria can process.
Oh, sure.
Or perhaps a heavy midsummer rainstorm washes a massive amount of lawn fertilizer and soil runoff directly into the pond. Even cutting down a large shade tree nearby can trigger an algae bloom because suddenly the water is exposed to intense, direct sunlight, which heats the water and supercharges algae growth.
Wow, even just removing a tree.
Yeah.
The guide also mentions string algae, those long, green, hair-like clumps that attach to the waterfalls. It notes that string algae is just nature's response to an overload of nutrients.
Exactly.
Heavy Minnesota storms can also temporarily turn the water cloudy due to dust, organic runoff, and sudden pH changes.
But the key is that these are temporary natural fluctuations.
And that leads to a piece of advice in the text that is frankly incredibly difficult to follow. The guide urges homeowners to simply be patient and explicitly warns against dumping heavy algaecides into the water to fix the green color.
I know it's hard to hear.
I mean, I have to imagine that if a homeowner is staring at a backyard that looks like a toxic green swamp, sitting on their hands and doing nothing feels incredibly wrong. Like doing nothing, really.
It goes against every instinct we have to fix a visible mess. But you have to view algae as a symptom, not an infection. If you dump heavy chemical algicides into a green pond, you will absolutely kill the algae, and the water might look clear for a few days. But those chemicals are indiscriminate. You are also carpet bombing the beneficial bacteria.
Oh, right. So you are destroying the biological filter all over again.
The killing the cure. Not only have you wiped out your bacteria, but now you have thousands of dead algae cells decaying at the bottom of the pond.
Which produces more ammonia.
Yes. A massive spike in ammonia, which starts the entire cycle over again, but this time with a severely weakened bacterial colony. It becomes a treadmill of chemical dependence.
That sounds exhausting.
Think of algae like weeds in a vegetable garden. A little bit of algae growing on the rocks is completely normal. It means the water is fertile and alive.
Right.
An overwhelming amount of algae just signals that your nutrient balance is off.
Right.
You don't pave over a garden with concrete to get rid of a few weeds. You adjust the soil. In a pond, you add more aquatic plants to outcompete the algae for nutrients, or you feed the fish less.
Speaking of the fish, we should definitely talk about the inhabitants of the pond, because they aren't just passive decorations. They are active participants in this nitrogen cycle, and their behavior is heavily dictated by the environment.
They're entirely at the mercy of the water temperature.
The fish behavior outlined in the guide is fascinating. For instance, if you walk up to the pond and your fish immediately dart into caves or hide under lily pads, the initial reaction is usually, oh no, my fish hate me, or they're sick.
It's easy to take it personally.
Right. But the guide reminds us they are prey animals. Herons, raccoons, and owls look at a backyard pond like a sushi buffet.
Literally.
Hiding is just a sign of healthy survival instincts. But the way their biology shifts with the weather is incredible. As the Minnesota weather cools down in the fall, the fish might just sit completely motionless near the bottom of the pond for days.
Because fish are cold-blooded, their metabolism is directly tied to the temperature of the water around them. In warm summer water, they are active, hungry, and digesting food rapidly. But as the water temperature drops, their biological processes physically slow down to conserve energy.
The feeding guidelines really drive that home. The guide states, you must switch to a cold water wheat germ fish food when the water temperature drops below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have to stop feeding them entirely once the water hits 50 degrees.
That is a critical rule for fish survival in cold climates.
So if you toss a handful of protein-rich summer fish food into 45-degree water, they might eat it, but their digestive system has essentially shut down for the winter, so that food just sits in their gut and literally rots.
Exactly.
Which can cause internal infections and kill them.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources actually emphasizes this kind of metabolic slowdown as a necessary natural part of winter preparation for aquatic life. You have to let them transition into that dormant state.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. While we are on the topic of fish diets, we have to talk about koi. People pay hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars for these elegant, colorful koi fish. They look so graceful gliding through the water.
They do.
But the Superior Ponds Guide describes them as underwater lawnmowers. They are natural foragers, which means they act less like elegant pets and more like feral pigs rooting around in the mud.
They are incredibly curious and very destructive if left unchecked.
It's so funny to me.
A koi's natural instinct is to sift through the bottom of a river or pond looking for insects and plant matter. If you place an expensive potted water lily or water hyacinth directly into the pond, a mature koi will happily root right into the soil, shred the tender root systems, and eat the plant down to a nub.
It's such a hilarious image, this beautiful, expensive fish just absolutely wrecking the landscaping. So I have to ask, how do you protect the plants?
Well, the guide offers some great strategies for armoring the plants against your own fish. You essentially have to use larger river rock or heavy gravel to cover the soil inside the aquatic plant pots, creating a barrier the fish can't easily move.
Smart.
You can also build little protective caves out of larger stones to house the delicate plants and ensure you are feeding the koi consistently enough during the summer so they don't get hungry enough to view the landscaping as an all-you-can-eat buffet.
And a healthy pond ecosystem attracts more than just the fish you put in it.
Oh, definitely. The wildlife factor.
Yes. A lot of homeowners get nervous when frogs move in, or when dragonflies start buzzing around the surface thinking they've attracted pests. But the guide points out this is a sign of immense success.
It means the ecosystem is working.
Exactly. Dragonflies are apex predators of the insect world. They consume massive amounts of mosquitoes, and the flowing water of the pond's waterfalls and skimmers naturally deters mosquitoes from breeding anyway because they require stagnant water to lay eggs.
A balanced ecosystem provides its own pest control.
So we've talked about the bacteria, the plants, the fish, and the insects. Nature is clearly doing the heavy lifting to keep the water clean. But nature can't do it alone inside a synthetic rubber bowl.
Right.
It requires a mechanical heartbeat to keep the oxygen flowing and the water moving.
The engineered foundation is what makes the biology possible.
And the equipment running the pond is subjected to some harsh conditions. The guide is very practical about life expectancy. A professional-grade water pump running 24/7 typically lasts about 5 to 6 years before its performance starts to noticeably decline.
It's a machine, it wears out.
But they make a crucial point for troubleshooting. If you walk out and your pump has suddenly stopped dead, do not immediately jump to the conclusion that you need a $500 replacement. Half the time, it's a mechanical blockage, like a clogged intake screen full of leaves, or, even more commonly, a tripped GFCI outlet.
The electrical safety outlets are incredibly sensitive by design.
Right. A GFCI outlet is designed to instantly cut power if it detects any moisture where it shouldn't be, preventing electrocution. A heavy Minnesota thunderstorm can easily trip the outlet. Pushing a reset button on the wall is a lot cheaper than buying a new pump.
It really highlights the need to check the simple mechanical links before assuming a catastrophic failure.
Along with pumps, many ponds utilize aerators to push oxygen into the water. This supports both the fish and the beneficial bacteria. The guide is careful to note that aerators are not magic algae erasers.
No, they aren't.
They just increase the dissolved oxygen, helping the biological filter process waste more efficiently. But when discussing aeration, they make a strong distinction between surface aeration, like the splashing of a waterfall, and bottom aeration.
That distinction becomes vital the larger and deeper a pond gets.
Wait, if a waterfall is churning the surface, doesn't that oxygenate the water?
It does, but only the top layer.
Oh.
Imagine a pond that is 3 or 4 feet deep. The waterfall is splashing and mixing oxygen into the top foot of the water column. But water is heavy, and it stratifies.
Okay.
The water sitting at the very bottom of that deep pond can become completely stagnant. It runs out of dissolved oxygen, creating an anaerobic environment where harmful bacteria thrive and sludge builds up quickly.
Yuck. So what's the solution?
Bottom aeration. That involves dropping diffuser discs all the way to the floor of the pond. As those diffusers release columns of bubbles, the upward movement of the air physically pulls that stagnant, deep water up to the surface where it can release gases and take in oxygen. It forces the entire water column to circulate.
That makes perfect sense. And managing those gases becomes a literally life or death situation when winter arrives. The piece of equipment that surprised me the most was the winter deesser. When I hear deesser, I always pictured a heavy-duty submersible heater acting like a giant hot tub heater for the fish so they don't freeze.
That is a very common and very dangerous misconception.
Really?
Trying to heat an outdoor pond in a Minnesota winter would result in a staggering electricity bill, and it disrupts the natural metabolic slowdown the fish require. A deesser is essentially a floating heating element, but its only job is to generate enough localized heat to keep a small, dinner plate-sized hole open in the surface ice.
Oh, wow. So it's really more like an exhaust pipe.
Yes, an exhaust pipe is the perfect way to visualize it. Even in the dead of winter, the organic matter at the bottom of the pond, decaying leaves, fish waste, dead algae, is still slowly decomposing.
Okay.
That anaerobic decomposition produces toxic gases, specifically hydrogen sulfide and methane. If the pond freezes completely solid, that ice acts like a locked lid on a pressure cooker.
Oh, that sounds bad.
It is. The toxic gases slowly build up in the water, displacing the oxygen, and will eventually suffocate and kill the fish. The de-icer simply keeps the chimney open, allowing those toxic gases to vent out into the atmosphere while allowing fresh oxygen to diffuse into the water.
It's incredible how precarious the balance is, relying on these specific pieces of equipment, and the elements they're exposed to are brutal. We are talking about pumps, PVC plumbing, check valves, and rubber liners enduring Minnesota freeze and thaw cycles year after year.
This raises an important question about realistic expectations.
Right.
The heavy synthetic rubber used for pond construction EPDM liner is incredibly tough and can easily last 15 to 30 years.
That's a long time.
It is, but it only achieves that lifespan if it's properly armored. The entire liner must be covered with rock and gravel to protect it from the ultraviolet rays of the sun, which will eventually make the rubber brittle.
Makes sense.
And it protects it from the sharp claws of raccoons or dogs. Similarly, mechanical parts like check valves, which prevent water from flowing backward when the pump is turned off, have rubber flappers inside them that will naturally stiffen and fail over a decade of use. Expecting them to last forever is just unrealistic.
Which brings us to the ultimate mantra of the Superior Ponds Guide. Maintenance is always cheaper than recovery.
Absolutely.
Letting a skimmer basket fill with leaves puts strain on the pump. Ignoring a tiny leak caused by ground settling can lead to massive soil erosion under the liner.
Preventive maintenance protects the initial investment. Taking 20 minutes a week to empty baskets, dose beneficial bacteria, and check water levels is the difference between a minor seasonal chore and a catastrophic expensive system failure down the road.
So, synthesizing everything we've pulled from Water Feature 101, the ultimate takeaway here is a fundamental shift in perspective. You have to stop looking at your backyard pond as static, unchanging landscaping.
Right.
It is not a patio paver. It is not a swimming pool. Once you accept that it is a living ecosystem that will inevitably change with the weather, adapt to the seasons, and rely on microscopic biology to function, your stress level will just drop.
The goal of a backyard pond is never spotless, sterile perfection.
The goal is peace. Finding harmony with a slice of nature right outside your back door.
Beautifully said.
I want to leave you with a brand new thought to mull over as we wrap up. We have just spent this entire deep dive discussing the incredibly delicate, heavily engineered balance required to keep a tiny 15-foot backyard pond from turning into a toxic green swamp. We need electric pumps, bottom diffusers, winter de-icers, specific gravel armoring, and carefully calculated fish diets just to keep it stable. So the next time you are out hiking and you walk past a massive, thriving, crystal-clear natural lake or a winding forest stream, take a moment to look at it closely. Ask yourself, what kind of invisible, intricate, and staggering biological maintenance is nature performing right beneath our noses 24 hours a day to keep the entire planet's water in balance, without a single human pump, filter, or chemical in sight?
It really is something.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you truly understand the mechanics behind it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.
Superior pond, superior care, your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest at your call. Your pond stays perfect.